Hello, this is Odoamne, and you're on the YouTube channel of the internet's most notorious ginger man, Thorin.
Right, this is going to be another one of my donated discussions. It's just me and Matt this time, just like the last one. So we'll see where we get to and where we go. So obviously, League is your main game, Matt. What are the big things on your mind at the moment?
Well, the LEC just started. I think you guys did a good job on the whole LCS drama. I don't really need to go over that. I think that was done, taken care of. I thought LCS is kind of stupid in general to me. So just follow LEC and probably talk about some more co-streaming stuff about LCK and LPL.
Let's do it.
So so it started like last time. I think we talked a bit about like the vibe of the co-streams or like chilling with the boys, where it's like it's more fun with an analytical content. So I guess like in the context of Dom's like co-streams, he's gone because Yamato is streaming as well nowadays. So it's always people in the call. So I guess I'm kind of looking for a new analytical content and wondering how like watching the LPL, or if you watch how you watch games yourself, like on VODs, like what do you look for and how do you double time it, or how do you enjoy your VODs exactly?
Yeah, I would say in general, like, I think by the way, that's like a trick that most analysts actually use, is you essentially put like double speed on the VOD. And then what you do is you just choose when you slow it down and you pause it and you rewatch the team fight or whatever. Because obviously, like, I will say in the modern, like, let's say the last 6 or 7 years, there is way more like ganks and action early game. But if you remember, there was like a particular period of League of Legends, I'm going to say like season 5 to season 7, where like the first 10 minutes, like there might be laners that just, there was no kills. You know what I mean? It was just people farming, and then maybe you had the odd crazy solo kill. So to me, yeah, what you're trying to do essentially is just pass the VOD. You're not trying to watch the whole thing from beginning to end in real time. I actually think that's the main reason why people like me and a lot of the analysts actually watch VODs, because it's a nightmare watching the live stream and having the breaks and having the analyst desk and having the shit interview you don't care about. And then, as we say, like if there's nothing happens in the game, you just sat there. Even worse with those fucking pauses. The pauses for me, I can't even believe people can watch live League of Legends as much as they do. It just kills it for me. Like those pauses can last 50 minutes. It's crazy. Yeah. So yeah, I do that on the VOD. And then in terms of like the analytical angle, that's the reason why. I mean, we talked about this a little bit last time. It's why actually my favorite core streamer is actually LS, because even if I will say I don't think LEC is necessarily his specialty, he just always applies that lens. Like he's always going to break the draft down. He's going to criticize the item builds, or he's going to say if he thinks a matchup should be won a certain way. I told you on the last one, the problem I have with, I mean, amazingly, Cadrill's the worst defender, but the problem I have with Dom is he's figured out what I figured out on the desk years ago, which is more about entertaining people than it is about educating them. And they definitely, like let's be real, that whole nutsack thing is more about just being funny, isn't it? And being like, saying silly things. And occasionally you have a little bit of analysis and you throw a bit in there, but you're not trying to go crazy with it, you know? And I get it. They're doing so many hours also. It is really hard. I mean, they're live the whole time. Remember, when I do a CSGO analysis desk, I'm doing like 2 minutes and then I go watch a game for 2 or 3 hours. Then I come back and do 2 minutes. Like, if I really had to talk, I mean, I do it in my watch parties. It's hard to just stay on the game, mate. That's why if you even listen to the CSGO watch parties we sometimes do, sometimes I'm just telling a story about something that happened at an event or something about a player and something unrelated to the match, because it's just something to entertain people. So I actually don't think there is that much good analytical content. It's why if you've never got into him, the guy that I've brought on a bunch of my content, he's actually a patron of mine, that guy Jensen Goh from Singapore. Yeah. He is actually really good because first of all, he has his own totally unique lens, which is his whole thing, because he used to be a coach of some decent like LEC and other level teams, is his whole approach to the game is, instead of being about like scaling or like early game or like team fighting or pick comps, his whole thing is about whether the style of your team is to try and control the map or to, like, I think, play off the waves or something. I can't remember which the angle is that overall that contrasts it. Or I think it's scaling versus map control or something. And if you ever look at his lens, it is a really interesting lens to apply to the game. And once you identify the teams that do the map control style, you start to see essentially like what the win conditions are, better than just looking at a draft, etc. And if people don't know, he actually does have his own Patreon where he takes big games, like sort of marquee games from LCK, LPL, the big leagues, and he does like an Excel sheet or some sort of like a spreadsheet where I think he puts in like like things he observed in the game and sort of breaks it down on quite a deep analytical level. So if people are looking for like the new nerd, it's just you have to pay to support him because he doesn't have a massive core stream like LS. This is a guy who's providing a lot of good info, actually. Also, I will say, look, I don't like him, so I don't personally promote him. He's a twat as a human being. But there is a reason why I used to do that show with Veteran back in the day for LEC, because I wanted someone who was a specialist just on LEC, and just like all the others, he has his own lens, he has his own model, he has his own way of thinking, he has his own biases and things he likes and things he doesn't. And as far as I know, he still does videos on his YouTube channel of like going through matches and looking at moments in the game. So look, he's another person where, let's be real, you have to like LS to really watch his stream. If you don't like him, he is going to annoy you because of his personality. So it's similar with Veteran. If you can vibe with his personality, there is some good stuff there. He does sometimes nail some people. Like, if people don't know, he was one of the first people to nail that Broxer was a bit boosted in Fnatic. He's had a bunch of players he's sort of gotten to. Cersei, he actually nailed that he was just playing that late game farming style, even though Cersei's denied it to this day. So he has his areas, like them always strong and ways weak. So I think there's another one that, I mean, it's funny I even mentioned it because as far as I know, I think if you go on his YouTube channel, he gets fuck all views now, mate. He has like videos that have like 800 views or something. So if people are really hardcore and they're looking for someone else to analyse LEC, I think there's one right there. Because I do think the broadcast has fucking just abandoned that completely. Like, it's half jokes and it's half analysis, but then even some of the people doing the analysis, it's like, they're not really the strongest analysts for me. So I actually find that the LEC broadcast has lost it a bit. What about for you? What do you actually enjoy in terms of analysis?
Well, I think so. I watched Dom in the early LPL, so that was like when he was without anyone there, and it's like it's the first thing when he wakes up. So like he was pretty analytical during LPL games last season or the year before. So that kind of analysis, like, it's just good. He talks about the game. There's some like interesting impact, like what the jungler is doing and like how it's influencing the lanes and what people are doing, if it's good or not, like other stuff inside there. But like, normally when I'm watching the LEC on a broadcast level, I'm at work, so I'm just listening to it to know what's going on, not so much the analysis. So, and then I rewatch the certain teams I want to watch, and at that point, it's like you're kind of looking at what you're going, trying to apply like the other analysis content you've caught, and then really I'm trying to get into the VOD view, but like I don't exactly know what I'm looking for some of the times because I'm not like a straight up league analysis person.
I mean, I'll give you a tip there. One thing you could do if you're not that good yourself is either listen to, I mean, let's be real, like my company has a million talk shows. So either if you want like LEC, me and Dom do one, but to be fair, Summoning Insight covers usually LCS and LCK. I would say that like Power Spike seems to be all of them. Face Check still exists on the Esports Bet channel. So it just depends what pool of analysts you want. But on all those shows, they're going to pick certain games they tunnel in on and things they go in on. So what I would do is if they talk about that, maybe then you go yourself and watch the VOD and try to see what they're talking about. Or sometimes even see if they exaggerated. Maybe they took like one play and they blew it out of proportion. Like, I won't name names down because it'd be rude, but there's definitely times where some of my co-hosts, I can tell they're still talking about one game they remember that guy playing last split, and like that's the only one game where he did that. But they're talking like, yeah, then he bloody always throws like that at Baron with the ult, and you're like, really? I think he did like one time, but okay, you're tunneling a bit on that. So I do think talk shows are pretty good for that. I would also say, even though they are fucking plebs, if you go to the Reddit post-match threads for each of the matches, you're at least going to get a sense of like what the big moments were in the VOD, if you know what I mean. So if you see a game where the score looks really close, and then they're like, oh, of course, you know, bloody, I'll pick a random team here. Of course, Mad Lions throw off bloody Kazi. Then you'll know, like, oh, probably go watch the team fights and see if he fucked up his positioning or something. I think that's another good way where essentially you can you're almost like crowdsourcing what areas to go and watch in the game. It's why actually, I'll just bring it up again, even though it was obviously my company that was involved in it. It's another reason why it's tragic that the fucking ProView thing went away, because one of the best things about ProView was it actually had a timeline built into it that showed you the instances of all the things that happened, a team fight, a kill, a death, a tower, and you could actually click on that moment on the timeline. It would just take you to that moment in the VOD, as it were. So I thought that was a mega feature. I actually thought, because I thought it was going to take off and pop off, but unfortunately all the online shit meant that it sort of got downsized, and then Riot got pissed off with it because they're idiots. Basically, I hope that one day that would like be the future, that like any nerd who wanted to see like more in-depth shit, we'd all just have that essentially. We'd all be able to just really quickly go through games to where we want to get to and see the good parts, you know. Because I also definitely don't want, even though I'm doing it on double speed, I'll also still skip through. Like if I skip through 10 minutes and there wasn't a kill, unless someone says something really interesting, like, oh, how was he on that champion in lane? I'm not going to go back and look usually, you know.
Yeah. I think there should be just a better way to like annotate VODs, like the pro view stuff. I don't know why that's not a thing anymore.
I mean, it could also, the stupid thing is you could also literally make it like a feature of other services that just haven't bothered. Exactly. That's one of the reasons I invested in that company, because the tech actually looked super interesting, you know. It solved the problem we all have. But as you're saying, basically, it's why it's so annoying that everyone on Reddit and Twitter is pretending they're like fucking LS and just want to go balls deep on strategy and intricate details. Because the reality is they just want to be entertained, and then what they're doing is they're taking what really are just feelings. Like, I like Reckless, so it wasn't that bad how he played the team fight. And then they're just using analysis or fake analysis to justify that, or the other way around, or they really like their player, so they're just hearing an analyst like, yeah, then his pathing was great. Like, of course, his pathing this split is unbelievable. You know, he's the best jungler in the league. Like, no, I don't think most people really try to like deeply analyze. It's more like you just want to have a sense of what's going on and enjoy the action, right?
Yeah.
I mean, since I'm not that deep, obviously, in League myself, because I'm the CSGO guy, that tends to be more how I watch it. Like, if you notice, I don't try to break down super complicated ideas like, did they Baron stance right? I'm more stuff like, Monty nailed this years ago when he told me this. My style's more like player performance. I just tried to ask things like, is this player considered, like, for example, Caps today? If you watch the game he played today, he kind of shit the bed in the game and fucked it up for his team. And he's supposed to be not only the GOAT, like, player in the fucking West, but he will always be considered, even in these splits, like the absolute best mid laner. So if he's supposed to be the best mid laner, then my points are going to be like, wow, the fuck did he throw the game? And why didn't he use his resources? And why did he do these misplays? You know, like, that's my angle's more like looking for the little details there, the little edges that I can maybe get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm kind of like into the analysis space, and like I'm trying to learn, but like,
are you a fan of the draft?
The
stuff?
knowledge in there, yeah. The draft stuff's good. It's like draft is probably my strongest suit. It's like,
do you watch much of the LS stuff, like as in his videos outside of the core streams?
Yeah, so I watched a ton of LS since he started.
Because I definitely think, by the way, his videos for patches and tier lists of like champions, I think are really good as setting a basis so you know what to expect in the game. Because then instead of thinking like, is this player good on the champion, you're also going to think like, how good is the champion? I find those very useful as well. Also, as a random thing, I know we meme on him a lot, but when Freak does patch analysis, he's actually pretty good at them, mate. Like, he actually has some pretty good angles on like what's strong and what's not, and he seems to understand, like, I mean, he's obviously part of the balanced design team. Like, he actually seems to have a good sense of some of that stuff. He can actually be, that's actually underrated content. It's only when he's on broadcast I've had him obnoxious.
Yeah. Lots of people to check out. I know Yamato Can is also doing like the review, and the one I watched today on yesterday's game was pretty good.
He has some pretty good ones, yeah.
So
he seems like he's also trying to find like his own angle, you know, because he's trying to very much come at it from a coach's perspective, you know. But I have noticed he does catch quite a lot of stuff that sometimes some of the other people don't. Probably because, let's be real, he's used to doing actual ROD reviews with his team, so he's also sort of looking for the key things, or he's looking if like the support fucks up their active in the team fight, whereas I'm just watching like the carry and see if he wins the game, or if the tank peels for him, or whatever the fuck, you know.
Yeah.
What else in League's good at the moment? Are you actually enjoying the LPL?
So I've been having like my schedule is a bit off, and I haven't been waking up early enough to catch the games live. That's normally when I watch them, because I don't mind waking up that early. So
did you watch any of LEC this weekend?
I watched like a couple of the VODs of yesterday's games, but I wasn't able to watch any today.
No, we can just talk about those. Like, what are the teams that you're interested in? What teams have you watched, or are you interested in for this split? Give me some angles.
So I didn't get to watch too in depth the Fnatic game, but I'm kind of interested in what Fnatic is doing with Trimby and Askarinen.
Yep,
being the rookie guy, and whoever this Noah guy is. I didn't really get that much in on him. And then I also want to kind of follow up how BDS is doing.
Yeah,
I like Crowny as a player, but I don't know.
Let me go in on the Fnatic part then. So the thing with Fnatic is, if you watch the Best Damn League show, you might notice me and Dom are actually pretty high on them. Like, I think I had them as like my 5th team, and I think Dom has them as 4th. And I actually know why. One, behind the scenes, you might have seen a lot of people memeing this. This is why. Behind the scenes, supposedly they're like the new G2. They just wreck everyone in the scrims. So that's interesting in itself. And then the Noah guy and the Trimby angle, like you say, are really what's like spiced it up, because Trimby was one of those players where like he did look sort of shit in the other splits this year with Koi. Like, he was one of the weaker parts, but because he always has that large champion pool, and also because he just like let's be real, it's also an enchanter met, which is like his style of champions. He's one of those guys where like someone was obviously going to gamble on him. It's like when you have a player that has a down year in a main sport, there'll still be a team that'll just gamble. Like, hey, maybe we get him and he has like an up year again, he recovers, or maybe he's with the wrong sort of players or environment. So I think that was a really good trade for Fnatic. I think it was a stupid as fuck trade from Koi, which is the side that I sort of heard it was from. But I think on the Fnatic side, it was a really good move. And then all, not least because I haven't had anyone who can play bloody enchanters forever. And then also the Noah guy, I didn't know much about him because this is one of the splits where I haven't watched that much of the RLs because there's so much of the league to watch and I've got so much things in my company. So normally I tend to watch like the finals of the RLs and a lot of the EU Masters, but I didn't watch much. And basically people told me the Noah guy, who's like a Korean import, actually is supposed to be cracked as like an ADC. Like supposedly everyone thought he wasn't just the best ERL ADC, but from like solo queue as well. Supposedly people think he's like going to be one of the absolute best ADCs. So that's very, very promising because if you have a legit bot lane, you're already going to be in business in this meta. And then the Oscaridin guy's just all right. Seems okay to me. Now, I have got a little bit of info I can give you here. I'll drop it here exclusively. I might say it on Best on League Show as well, which is that if you wonder why Razork and Humanoid are just paired together like they're in some sort of death spiral where they can never be parted and Fnatic won't kick one of them or bench one of them, basically I've just heard the contracts are too big. Because if you think about when they signed them, Razork really had been like an MVP candidate on that Misfits lineup a couple of years ago, and Humanoid had obviously won both the splits. And so people thought like, oh my God, he's like the new fucking Expecke or whatever, like he's a great mid laner and he's a shot caller. And the things I have heard, his game knowledge is really good. The problem is, if you haven't noticed, I flamed the fuck out of Humanoid because I know that one, he gets paid an enormous fucking salary. Like he's on a really big contract as far as I know. And so what that means is, as far as I know, not only do other people not want to take those contracts off your hands, because I think they're signed until the end of next year, but also, so you can't do a trade, but also if you bench one of them, I think like Humanoid, for example, you have to just pay him fucking mega bucks even if you bench him. So basically Fnatic's just trapped. They've got to just use him basically. So even though Razork and Humanoid don't really have the great synergy, still never have, they just have to use them. And then also I will say, what I heard about Humanoid is this. It is true that he is like sometimes lazy or he just doesn't give a shit that he's dying in the game or whatever. But I've heard that's because he's one of those people who, because he has a really good game knowledge, thinks he like knows it all basically. And if you fuck up once or twice, he just like, it's a bit like old Doublelift. He just loses trust in you and he just plays for himself. And then he also just stops like sort of giving a fuck. So basically, if you have a good team around him that perform well, he should actually become really good again, potentially. Now, I'm still skeptical about that because he was such a fucking shitter, I thought, in these last splits at times, and he was so disgraceful last summer. But fair enough. If this bot lane's really good and the Noah guy's really good, Razork's looked pretty good so far, there's a world where Humanoid can play well, and suddenly, like, I know we all memed up for that all year long, but suddenly, why can't they be like the fourth team? Why can't they be in the playoffs and mix it up with the Mad Lions or something like that? Why can't they? To me, it makes sense. So I actually think there's a lot of promise in the Fnatic team. It's quite interesting in that sense. I'll also throw this out there because people might not have realised it, but you know the guy who... In Fnatic, they changed out the coaching staff. And in the guy who came in, the head coach, is called Nightshare, and he's the brother of Freeze, if you don't know, the twin brother. Well, remember, they're from Czech Republic, which is the country of Humanoid. So I would imagine he's probably even like worked with him in the past, or they know each other, etc. So you've already got a vibe there. And then for people who don't know, the assistant coach is that Finnish guy, Heaver, who used to be a support player in LEC. And then previously, I believe he was working with SK Gaming. Let me just double check. No, he was working with Misfits, sorry. And he was an assistant for Misfits last year when they had the good lineups where like they managed to make it work with Neon and Vethio and so. So as far as I know, people tell me the Heaver guy's a really good eye for the game and understands like a lot about like draft and stuff. So I actually think even the coaching staff's probably pretty good. So this actually is a split where as long as they can play well, I'm sort of looking forward to him. I'm a big Trimby fan, mate.
Yeah, me too. I like Trimby. He also has the flair where like we plays the different picks and tries to innovate and stuff.
I mean, he's like an LS disciple in that sense, yeah.
Yeah.
And what was the other one, BDS?
Yeah. Yeah, that was the other one, yeah.
What do you think about him?
What do I think about them? I mean, I watched their game. It was not very good Friday against G2. I think, like, you see the faults of Nook and Adam, but I don't know how much Crown he could have done in that game, but I think they just have so many flaws. Like I don't know how they got to the championship necessarily, but
That's why my suspicion is,
innovate.
like, one, it was the ADC meta, so Crowley carrying and having shit like Zeri definitely helped. But then the other thing is, I do think they were well coached. Like, I'll tell you, if you didn't watch the game today, right, here's how it went, right? So, in the first game, one of the reasons why it was shit is because Adam was on Malphite. In other words, he wasn't on Darius or Olaf, right? So as a result, he got exposed and looked shit. And obviously, if you're me and Dom, I mean, we've said this about Zanzara, we say it about Ebby. I would just mega cynically ban these fuckers like they were old school forgiven and never give them their picks. Well, spoiler, today when he played Koi, they gave Olaf to fucking Adam. They let him pick it. So as a result, they won that game. I mean, to be fair, Koi's also not that good a team, but that's one of the things I find crazy about their team is Adam's fundamentally not like an elite top laner. So to me, I would just waste so many of my bans and resource on him, mate. And then after that, like to me, Shio is like the reason I think that Nook's good. Like I think Nook's all right as a player, but I think Shio sort of elevates him. They seem to have a good synergy or whatever. Labrov's all right and Crowley's a beast, isn't he? So like the pieces are there where they should still hang around. They should realistically, they should still be like third or fourth to me because I'm a bit of a Vitality stan, so I think it's going to be them and G2 personally. But I think BDS can hang around, be third or whatever. So to me, part of the reason they got there is because they just beat Vitality twice, if you remember. So they beat them once and then they lost to Mad Lions in the final. So to me, the issue is, I think Vitality looked really appalling in that upper bracket match, if you remember. It was the one where Photon shit the bed.
Yeah.
Like, generally, they just looked so silly. They had some weird draft choices as well. Bo just sort of looked lost at times. I still think Vitality has mad potential. So I do think also, I personally think that was a weaker split. It's why I think Mad Lions was able to win me. I don't think they were actually that good. I think they also looked into some picks and stuff. So I think BDS is a well-coached team, but I'm kind of like, it's like you say, I still sort of don't believe they got away with it last split. Like, to be fair, they could have won the split, but that was their window for me. I don't think they can do it again. So I think they go down a bit. I think they're going to be more like if I had to guess their record in this round, it'd be like, 6-3 or 5-4 or something, They'll be in the groups, but I don't think they'll be elite. I mean, I do still love Crowney. I think the Shield guy's got potential. Labrov's all right. I also feel like, I actually hope if they're a top team, by the way, because in theory, BDS should have money. And I've heard they've paid players in the past for last year's like decent money. Mm-hmm. I also hope there's a world where they can like upgrade a position. Like imagine if they go, like, I'll give you an example. Obviously in Vitality, if the Photon guy's good, Alfari ain't coming back. And I've heard he isn't coming back this year anyway. What if Alfari goes into BDS and plays top lane? That'll be interesting, right?
Yeah. Do you have the conviction that Alfari can play weak side, like defer to Crowley, or do you think it's going to be a split?
Oh, no. Here's the thing about Alfari. This is the reason why people like Upset liked playing with him. What makes him brilliant is he can win his lane with no resources. Like, he does that shit where he'll play like the Gangplank or whatever and just be the weak side, and he'll just win out that way. Now, look, if he's in Team Liquid, you had fucking shitter tactical as the ADC. So obviously you're going to be like, give me the Jace, let me carry the game. So I actually think that's what made that team a bit disjointed. But I think actually the brilliant thing, if you know my favourite player of all time, Flame, the old top laner from Blaze back in the day, even when they switched to the tank meta, he didn't actually have to be like play through topside. He would just play the Renekton and he would just win lane or go even. And then it allowed Captain Jack or whoever it was back then, or Emperor, it allowed them to still be active. So I think he can absolutely play. I think that's one of the things about him as a player is, if anything, it might even be a strength to sort of be the one without the resources. He can just do a lot with a little,
Yeah. Do you have any knowledge on players like Adam, like these one tricks? Do you think like if it's possible to Adam to pull out like two more champs you can just whip out, then you can't out?
No, because here's the problem. It's a bit like when LS made that video where he just showed how
the fundamental knowledge like isn't there.
He just didn't understand wave management, basically. Like that is one of the, literally, it's why I always stress this, because I talk to players from all the different roles, so I get their perspective on what they think is overlooked or is more important than people think. All the top laners that are great say it's about wave management. So for example, they always tell me their number one complaint is sometimes their wave state's in a shit state and they've been ganked once or twice, and you have to essentially go out and gamble to kill a wave to get it to bounce back, that you might die. And sometimes you die doing that, and every pleb goes, why did he stay in lane? It's because if you just get pushed under the tower, you just lose the lane by like loads of CS, and you can't ever be on the map, and you can't ever have Herald and all that shit. So basically the problem with Adam is he doesn't seem to fundamentally understand any of that. And he really is a two-trick. Like, he just has those two champions, and half of it is that they're usually not the meta for top lane. So people just aren't used to playing Darius against whatever the current shit is. Even if they've played an Olaf, they're not really used to like the way he plays it, and he plays them quite aggro in lane. So to me, he also does that thing that's like a shit version of the Shy from Weibo, which is, the Shy, part of what makes him brilliant is sometimes he'll find a 1v1 that shouldn't even be possible because he's in a losing matchup and he's like down in health and he's being pushed in. But he'll sort of pick the most genius moment ever to push out and do some crazy dodge and kill them. But the problem is he'll also do that in like 5 times as well. To me, Adam's like that, except it's almost locked to me when he gets the fucking kill. So I actually just think he's a mega overrated player, mate. I think the real problem is this. Because BDS, in terms of culture, is a French org, they want people like him. Like, that's why they like having him, Shio, Nock. Like, it's somewhat, you've seen what those fans are like. The Spanish and French fans, if you're a team from their region, they go hard for you, mate. So if you have actual players from that country, and remember as well, I'll look up his age now, but I think he's only about 20 now, mate.
Yeah,
oh, he's 21. He's 21. So even so also people are going to naively think like, oh, I can learn and move on. But the big problem to me is he seems really arrogant. And I'm not just saying that because he's French. Like, he just seems really arrogant, mate. Like, it seems like he actually does think he's the shit and that he knows it all. And he thinks he's styling on people and that everyone's hating on him for, like, and everyone's making up reasons in the game that he's not that good. But to me, I'm a layman and I could just see like, mate, there's just basic fundamentals you don't seem to understand,
Yeah. It just seems like if he's such a weak point and people just ban him out, then is BDS even going to like go positive win rate?
That's the problem though, is they don't ban him out is the real problem. Because I don't know why, mate. They just, like, I'll look up how many times last split he got those champions. Because remember, he's been in the LEC for a bunch of splits now. Like, he had one split off last year or whatever. I think he played only the first one last year, but he's played something like 4 splits now. So I'll just quickly look up his stats on the champions. Right, so in the first split, the winter split, he played Darius and Olaf a collective 4 times in the regular split. That's 4 out of 9 games, mate. And then in the groups, he played Olaf 3 times out of 6 games, so half the time. And then they didn't make the playoffs that time, remember? That was when they weren't that good. And then in the spring split, he played... Oh, fair enough. In the spring split, he only played 1 game of Darius. Okay. But then you go to the playoffs, he played 1 game of Darius and 1 game of Olaf in the group, so half of his games. And then in the playoffs, he got to play 2 Darius games. Now, to be fair, he did win 2 Scion games, for example. He won a Malphite game. He has had other wins on other champions, but I'd also guess some of these are against bad teams. Some of them are against like chasey guys, a fucking coin flipper, Photon shit the bed to pick stupid champions. So I just...
also like Scion and the other tank are things that allow Crowny to carry, so he can mess.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's also why. Yeah, he can still sort of be useful to some degree. But yeah, I actually do think they give him those champions way too often, mate. Because unfortunately, I do think most coaches are still trying to do like almost Exodia drafts and do like they almost want to be like the LCK team and do the perfect draft against the opponent. So in a fucked up way, you feel like a noob banning shit like Darius and Olaf that isn't meta. You know what I mean? You don't feel like, it's just the right move as a top coach. But like I say, I would just be cynical. I don't care what it looks like. I just want to take you completely off your game.
Yeah.
But if you notice, that's why I've always been against global meta thinking, as it's called. It's one of my few heretical takes, I think.
Yeah, well, I don't like global meta either. I definitely like people innovating and like people playing strange shit and like.
By the way, if I was the coach of Adam, I would tell him absolutely pick the Olaf and Darius every time it's open. You think you can play the matchup? Go for it, of course. Like, I actually, in that sense, I agree with him playing. I just think he's an overrated player as well,
Yeah.
Who else is interesting to you?
I mean, I guess I was thinking about Odo. I think Odo could be traded away from XL at one point if it keeps going so bad.
The problem with that, as far as I know, is this. One, I think he got a pretty decent deal because if you don't know, that Tim Reichardt guy who took over XL was the Schalke guy and Odo used to be in Schalke, if you remember. So that's why, if you notice, their team has Odoamne, Abadagi and fucking Limit. They're all former Schalke players, if you don't know. And so, one, he might be on a deal that's too good. 2, the team is just so bad. Like, they're probably going to be 10th or 3rd split in a row, mate. And so if they're 10th 3 times in a row, you have to be a very, very special player like Opset, Yankos, and notice they're sort of stars. It's really hard to overcome the Reddit narrative that you must be shit if you're 10th place. And his style anyway is weak side, isn't it? So you're never the one who's looking good. You're trying to make your ADC look good. So the big problem I have is, behind the scenes, that one of the reasons, as far as I know, why Odo doesn't ever get like the G2 or the Fnatic offer, as it were, when they're good, that is because he is also like, It's not that he's like a bad teammate, but he's like very much like you know how they say in NA, you can't in the VOD reviews, like criticize your teammates or be too harsh with them. He is the guy where, like in my interview with Cersei, who's also Romanian, when they were in the same team, I said, like, what's Odoamne like? And he actually said that he actually like wanted me to flame him. Like he almost wants you to be combative because that's just his style. He likes to argue about things if he thinks it's not the right way. Well, the problem with that is, you also have a few players in LEC, in my opinion. Like, I could imagine that Vethio and Targamas, remember, they're like culturally French. I bet they fucking hated that, mate. Like, they're not the sorts of people who are going to, like, you'd like criticize them heavily. That's not really French culture in that sense. So I could imagine you have to put him with a very specific type of team. Like, the silly thing is, to me, I would want him on a team like a Fnatic, you know. Like, that's the team I want him on. Like, have him as a weak side, have him with Humanoid. They can argue as much as they fucking want in the review, but let's just go to work. Have him criticize Razork at the right times in the right ways, you know. But he also can be a cool teammate in terms of personality. So, put it this way, I can see why you ask it, because I still think he's good, mate. I watched him in his last 2 splits. Still looks good as champions. He just doesn't get a bloody chance, because that team has been so shit the whole year for whatever reasons. I mean, they've even changed a bunch of the players out, but it still doesn't matter. Like, they're just not good, I'm afraid. It's just sad because, I mean, I guess he got his LEC championship last year, but fucking hell. The amount of years I've had to wait for this guy to finally climb back to being an elite team again. He's been so good the whole time. Like, I really do think he's one of the best players Europe ever produced. Look at his longevity.
Yeah, his longevity is huge.
Are you a fan?
Yeah, I've been since you've been talking to him, I've been watching him more. He's always been like kind of in the background because like you just know he's been on H2K like that. That's a long time ago. I've seen him in the league for like 8 years or whatever.
Yep,
crazy.
I mean, except for when this one team now, Excel, was utter shit. Normally, he also does drag his teams up, you know, like, you notice how that, like, remember when he was on Schalke, that was when they were suddenly coming top 4, and they were nearly going to Worlds. Right. Then he was on, like, Rogue. They went from being a joke to being one of the best teams in all of Europe. Like, they were really legit. So, to me, I think he is just a really good player. But again, the problem he has is, it's like Impact. Right, Impact's a similar type of player, but if Impact star carries underperform, he can't do anything. You can't 1v9 a game as the weak side top laner playing fucking Gnar or whatever, you know. You got to have some help at some point. Especially, remember, in the modern day, motherfuckers are on like a Zeri with a Yumi on them. Like, you're not doing shit against stars and Gnar, you know.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else you're interested in?
I mean, we can talk a little bit about
What about this? Who is your favourite player? Who's your favourite LEC player?
That's kind of hard to say. I really like the innovation of picks. So I like Trimby the past couple of years.
Sure.
But as part of like carries, I don't know. Try to think of the players over the past years. I guess Trimby is a good one to start, but think anyone else I'm a fan of? I mean, I kind of like Jankos as the narrative and who he is as a player.
Well, I mean, this split's going to be quite interesting in that sense, right? He's got Vethio, he's got Flackhead. Mm-hmm. I mean, Flackhead looked like he was trolling a little bit in that first game, but even so, Vethio actually looked better already, mate. That's actually very exciting to me. I also thought Vethio looked so good on Misfits. Like, there's another player. I'm not out on him just because he had 1.5 bad splits on XL. Like, I've just heard behind the scenes, like I've said on my shows, he's just a guy that he's a bit temperamental emotionally, and he has to have the game his way, and he doesn't like to be uncomfortable. So if you have a player like Jankos, he can make you comfortable, mate. That's the dream jungler for that sort of mid laner. And he clearly can carry if you give him the resource and put him later in the game.
Yeah. And then the other one would be Upset. I remember that.
One of my favorites.
I like watching Upset.
What I love about Upset is this. Even though, obviously, his team can affect like whether he wins the game, he just looks like one of those players where even if his team is, like you saw this on that Fnatic team, even if his team looks like they're trolling and they're shit in the bed, he can actually like hold his mental together somehow. Yep. And he will just like, he really will do the dream of ADCs. Like I've played a lot of supports. You can imagine I've off-rolled ADC a ton. The hardest thing is ADC because you have to really be constantly doing those auto attacks and spacing and moving in and out. It's to basically, no matter how hard it is, always output the most damage possible and always like know when you can go in, do as much as you can and then get out when you have. That's the part of the game that does take brains, you know. People like Doubleth might get away with mechanics, but you really do need to be quite shrewd about how you do it. So to me, Upset, it's funny that it was a veteran who told me this years ago, but I sort of agree with him. To me, Upset skill-wise is actually the new Forgiven for me. It's a very similar type of player in that sense. They're just really, really fucking good at that role.
Yeah. I just like watching the Zeri games he carried on Fnatic. Like, I think it was last year. I don't know if it's winter, but it was because he wasn't on. He was on XL, yeah. But it was on Vitality. So like last year, the Zeri
Fnatic
games
last year.
Yeah, the Fnatic last year, yeah, where
Yes.
like Humanoid was throwing a bunch, and it was just put it all through upset, and he was carrying ridiculous games with the Zeri.
Oh, he was mega. And let's be real, that was even the Hillsang that could still fuck it in all over the place. So, like, how he kept his mental together in that team, I don't know. It's why I actually really hope Vitality gets it together. Because if they actually get it together and the other players are all good, dude, he deserves to have someone like Perks who can also win a game for you, you know, and it doesn't have to just be him. That's always been my dream for those mega carries. It was the same with Forgiven. Like, I've told this story before, but obviously everyone hasn't heard every piece of content I did. Back in the day, because they played together on that silly one-off run where it was... fuck was the team even called at the time? Oh, when they played on that Origin team in EU Masters, Froggen and Forgiven played together. Do you remember with Insec and fucking those guys? Right. That was later on where they just did it as a one-off. But before that, I remember saying, because obviously I'm a big Froggen fan too, I remember saying to Forgiven, like, you should try and play with Froggen, mate. He's also like a fucking really good mid laner, really consistent. Like, it's going to take away all your headaches, and then you should have to worry about the other players. And the problem is, though, I think it's the other way around. I think Froggen just didn't want to play with Forgiven because, I mean, everyone knows his rep. Like, it's not even that he's pure toxicity. He's just toxic in the game. And the problem is, when he says a bunch of evil shit to you in the game about how you're subhuman because you failed to fucking do a gank or something, you're going to come out of the game and he's going to just think like, oh, now we can be pals. It's like, fuck you. You know what I mean? Like, you can have that bad feeling. So unfortunately, his rep does precede him and it's real. Like, there's a reason people didn't want to play him. So Upset doesn't have the bad rep though. Upset is a really driven guy. He's actually, I think he's not the best team, but he's just like a middle teammate. He's like a good player. So to me, if they can work it out, him and Perks, I still think it could be really good. It's just about getting the rest of the team in order, you know?
Yeah. I think you contrasted the Forgiven Froggen thing where you have the mid laner either needs to be like the aggressive carry or the scaler, and then the AD carry is the opposite of that.
So I think if you just look at teams, it makes sense,
Perks,
right?
Yeah, Perks is kind of playing more that way anyways too, right?
Yeah.
Less carry.
No, exactly. Because what Perks seems to have done now, even though, by the way, if he's on the right champions, he can still lane, absolutely. Mm-hmm. He just seems like he's just gone to the point in his career. It reminds me a bit of, actually, to some degree, what people like Faker and Zhao who have done. Once they realise, wait a minute, my actual area where I'm ahead of everyone is like doing like a late game move that's genius, or like making a read late game. They essentially, I think sometimes they almost overload on that. Because if you look at those players, sometimes it seems like they're just looking the whole game for a crazy flank or some big move. Whereas to me, it's like, you don't have to give up your lane and stuff though. Like, in my opinion, all players, if they put the time in and they really care about it, can be really good at lane still. I mean, people like Rookie is still fucking mega over in LPL, mate.
Yeah.
What about an LPL? Any good teams there you're interested in?
No, so I mostly my LPL viewing experience is mostly through Dom. So I watch like the OMG games. I get hype over.
Are you a
like,
fan?
The JDG. I do like OMG. The innovation.
Yeah, it's hidden, right?
Cream. Yeah, it's like Cream playing like the AD Assassins. Like, when you force picks that work, like, I love seeing teams that force something to make it work, because this shows like you're trying not global meta. So like Cream playing all the AD Assassins and like watching it work is pretty entertaining.
Yeah, the other thing about that team that people don't seem to realise, because essentially everyone, the only player they know is Cream, probably because they listen to Dom's streams or just remember him mentioning him. But that guy they have as ADC, Abel, if people don't know, he was actually part of like a generation that was supposed to replace the UZIs. It was like him, Jackie Love, and that iBoy guy, if you remember. So the Abel guy actually, even once upon a time, was the guy they were using in RNG when UZI would take those breaks till the fucking New Year's or whatever it was every year. So I actually already saw him play Demacia Cups and stuff. He clearly had skill. He was clearly a good player. So yeah, I think actually that team's mad underrated. It's just they don't have the names is all. They don't have the names. But they definitely got a really fun player. That's why I've told you for years. It's one thing years ago when it was really dodgy, like there wasn't like an English language stream, or it was hard to get it. You had to go on like some weird Weibo type fucking website to watch the games. Yeah, I understand then why people don't watch. But mate, what people claim they like about like LCS, LPL's just that but better. Like, the games are really exciting. You have all these amazing fucking like one thing I love about LPL is even when the West is just like, oh, you have to play like Gragas in the jungle, dude, they'll just be pulling out like the Nidalee and shit like that. So, I mean, sometimes it's top lane now, but you know what I mean? They'll be pulling out some mad aggressive shit. They'll be like balls deep on the Lilia when it came out, and so you'll just get these games that are like they almost look like a solo queue game where some fucking rank 1 players smurfing or something. They look just incredible carry games, and they have so many games. If you're watching them from VOD, you can just skip to the good ones. You don't have to watch all the shit games. You can just pick out the ones where someone carries the fuck out the game, like my boy Knight gets like 9 kills or something, you know.
Yeah. It's also super cool with the best of 3 stuff. You're comparing to like LCS and LEC.
Absolutely.
Like, you see what people do to bounce back after a loss or something.
If you notice, you can clearly see that people draft differently, because what you'll notice is people like, especially like the top teams like JDG, top esports, it's obvious that actually sometimes they do fuck around with the draft on one of the first 2 games if it's against a smaller team. It's why they are always in regular split, like ridiculous, like close 2-1 series against bomb teams that have no chance in the playoffs. Because you can tell they know, like, if I really do have Knight and Ruler, I can sort of fuck around with picks and see if something works in game 1. Because if I lose, right, we just buckle down, do a good draft in game 2, and then we'll probably win the last 2 games. Like, it's a bit like LCK to some degree. It's the difference in LCK is I actually think they're more serious and a bit more boring in that sense. I think in LPL they do have fun with it, mate. They do fuck around and they do try stuff from scrims that just worked 2 days ago only.
Yeah, LPL is pretty fun. I've not caught a whole lot of the games this season, but I watched, like, I think JDG BLG was like yesterday morning or 2 mornings ago. That was pretty entertaining.
For sure. What about, do you actually play League much?
I mean, I'm not right now. I played like yesterday, but I play some ranked games. I play some ARAMs every once in a while. I'm like a Pike support main now, so.
What's the appeal of ARAM, by the way? I've never understood why people play that mode.
It's ARAM is essentially like, so you don't need to think a whole lot in ranks. So like
because you're just spamming. Right, okay.
Yeah, it's not even like spam. It's like you're just relaxing, essentially. Like if you just, it's like spending leisure time. If you just have leisure time, you want to just like push some buttons.
Fair enough. Fun. The problem I have is, it's why I've told you I've never understood that concept where people are like, oh my God, I've got ladder anxiety. It's like, I don't give a shit what my rank is, mate. But the reason I play ranked 5v5 Summoner's Rift is I just want it to be a real game. You know what I mean? I want to try and play out like I've been in these scenarios before. I'm ahead in lane, I'm behind in lane. What do I do here? What items do I build? That's the part I find fun. Essentially, I tried it, even though it's a 5v5 game, I view it like StarCraft 1v1. Like, I know my build, I know what I'm going to do, I have an idea what they're going to do. And then part of me's on autopilot, part of me's thinking about the plan of what I want to do next, you know?
Yeah.
By the way, are you someone where, do you actually like League play? As in, like, if instead, you know, like the CSGO circuit, if we had the CSGO circuit for League of Legends instead, so it wasn't leagues, it was tournaments, would you prefer that?
I mean, I think so. I think just the tournament structure is just way more like hype, and like having a winner of a tournament is just better in general to a league going through. I mean, the LEC has like updated a bit, so it's been a lot more entertaining.
Yeah, the LEC format's not a bad sort of compromise between the two. But I agree with you. I mean, I always said this. I think it's been borne out by history. Think how many splits there was where someone was like I mean, last summer, if you remember, XL was doing really well for the first part of the split. Think how many times someone for the first 4 or 5 weeks like led the LEC or was looking elite, but because they dropped off in the last 3 weeks, no one remembers that. They just remember that, they were 6th or whatever, and you don't ever give a shit that they were good in week 4. But if that had been a LAN on week 4, dude, like XL could have like finished in the final or won the shit if they'd have got the right meta, you know. So that's why to me tournaments are better. I mean, put it this way. I tell you, one call I've got to take credit for, because I said it earlier in the year. You know, famously, Dom's one of the people who's pushed the idea that like MSI wasn't that good. Because to be fair, before it was only one team from each region, so it was realistically, it was just about LPL versus LCK in the final. And it's just single elim. So there's a lot of shit games. Not only inviting 2 teams was a great idea, but I told everyone, when you see double elim as the playoffs, you'll never want anything else. It's just the best. It's just fucking the shit, isn't it? I thought that tournament was excellent. It was one of the best I've seen in years.
Yeah, I kind of backed out after like the Korea failed to like show what they did in their finals. So I watched JDG win games, but like the BLG run was kind of a bit disappointing because like I was expecting so much more from Genji and T1.
The problem is, because everyone was hyped off like the fact that the bin guy was doing stuff on the mic and he had an exciting carry style, and obviously Yagao has like the cool storyline that everyone keeps counting him out and he's coming back and all that shit, and obviously the Elk guy was like the fucking Uzi eye, like play around me and I'll carry the game ADC. I get why the narratives were fun, but my problem is just like you're saying, if they'd have just straight up clapped, like for example, when JDG beat T1, that was fucking epic. That was really impressive stuff. That series was a banger. But the T1 and Gen G versus BLG low bracket series, they just weren't that good, mate. Like, because the Korean team didn't show up, like you're saying. People just shit the bed. Chovy just picked stupid shit. Like, T1 just across the board just hinted. Like, That's what kind of ruined that. Like if those two games series had been bangers, we would have ended up with something insane like 6 or 7 best of 5s that we'd watch that were like amazing, of like back and forth play. Like you never quite know we wouldn't know who would win the tournament, for example. By the way, I did nail that. I did tell everyone JDG would win, but whatever. I don't claim to be an expert. That's just sort of luck on my part. I'm just a fanboy of Night, aren't I? It's all good. It's all good. I do think, by the way, though, that JDG, the interesting angle for me is, remember, no one's ever done like the Golden Sweep or whatever, or the Grand Slam where you win both splits, MSI and Worlds. Like, dude, this team could do it. I think it's really capable.
Definitely.
Like, they're just so stacked. I don't know how even the meta can switch against them. Like, they're just so stacked. Remember, if he had to, 369 used to be a carry player, mate. If you had to, for some reason, play carries top, he could fucking do it. And spoiler, when Ruler was on Samsung, absolutely he can play weak side ADC. I mean, that's actually more the Korean style, if anything. So I think that team is just so cracked. I really think, like, I don't know if they will, but I think they can win everything. And if they do, that'll be such a game changer. Because as I was trying to say to Monty, but I don't think he almost got the significance of this. Everyone does that thing where once a Korean player goes to LPL, like Rookie, The Shy, Doinb, we almost think of them as Korean, as Chinese if they stay there too long, right? Like Doinb, it just feels like he is Chinese. He isn't. He's actually Korean, but he's just been there forever, right? But people forget, like, yeah, they had Zhao who won the MSIs. Dude, if Knight wins Worlds, he is like just a full-up Korean, Chinese mid laner. That would just like change history for a Chinese mid laner to win Worlds. That would really be a big deal. Like, so I think also the narratives are just amazing, as well as the team being so sick at fighting. Like, they have to be one of the strongest teams I've ever seen at fighting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is crazy. Like, isn't JD supposed to be like a super team too? Like, they're on like huge contracts.
I would imagine so. They've got to be, yeah. I mean, at that point, to get Ruler and Knight in the same offseason, you've got to be spending fucking cash money for that.
Yeah.
Which is fair play, because actually their team, I mean, I guess the thing about their team in the past for me was, I assume a lot of the old talents they had that were considered good, like when they had Zoom and people like that, they actually sort of like nurtured those guys as far as I know. Yagao, I doubt was ever on the biggest salary. Again, Yagao's sort of like the fucking Niski of LPL, if you don't know. Like, he's not really supposed to be like a genius mid laner that should win the league. He's more like sort of like an above average player that somehow, I mean, fair play, he must have like the playoff buff every year or whatever, but he seems to work well with his jungler. He just has, that's why I say he's a bit like Niski. He just seems to always slightly overperform. So it was a cool story. But yeah, the difference is, Top Esports was the one that I looked at the super teams before, where they had Jackie Love and they had fucking Knight, and then they even bought Zoom. If you remember, to play 369, there was like a trade between them. But now it looks like JDG just decided this year, fuck it, let's just go all in. Because yeah, I think the super, like, remember, most super teams don't even work. This one looks fucking banging, mate.
Kanavi is the JDG jungler, right?
Yep.
Okay, making sure. I think Kanavi like 2 years ago had some like really ridiculous carry jungler games, right?
Yeah, that was when he was with Yagao and all those guys. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The problem is, he's still good. He's still like a good jungler. It's just he's a bit more up and down for me now.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing about tournament play was like it kind of works better with the patch cycle too. Like, you want to see people when the patch hits, if you have more tournaments throughout the year, then you know this team is the best at this time. Whereas Worlds and MSI are not really like, they don't show the whole year, obviously.
No, and the dumbest thing is, if you think about it, we talk about it in the narratives. We never mention the patch, except rarely, unless it's a really extreme one, right? Like half the time when we talk about it, like, I'll give you an example. So, you know, Fnatic looked like shaky, but they were still getting through, and they got to come third in summer, and they got it together, sort of. But then at Worlds, in a couple of the games early on, they were looking really good. Like, oh my goodness, like they beat T1. Like, yeah, well, it's a totally different patch though, isn't it? So the problem is, that's one of the issues I have is, there's so many variables in League, but most narratives don't even take them into account. Like, we even just talk about players like, yeah, he had a bad split that year. You don't ask, like, well, what fucking champions was he on? How did his team draft? What was the meta? What was the patch at the time? What did that region play? We actually don't, because unfortunately, we're trying to do like the fucking Skip Bayless, Stephen A. Smith angle of like big sports ball things, like, the quarterback couldn't get it done, in the big game. It's like, you got to do that if you want to be like Joe Montana. We're just doing those like really simple big narratives, because let's be real, like I said, most fans aren't super analytical. They're not geniuses about the game. They just understand simple things like, this player's inting, this guy is smurfing. Like, that's like half of the fucking analysis even on stream,
Yeah. I mean, it's very hard to break down any of those like minute points to be understandable to the public. So
For sure.
League is already a complex game.
No, I agree it is. It's why I've told you on that last one when we talked about core streaming. What I really would like is like essentially a specialist expert stream. I even feel like what I would do, here's a unique idea no one's ever told you before. I would even do it where you use like the YouTube rewind function to actually allow you to sort of like more in-depth analyze fights. Then what you do is you'd have your core stream partner in this scenario. He'd have the game going live, and maybe you share your screen with him. And then, because if you don't know, this is how it's done in CSGO. In CSGO, you have one monitor for the casters. That's the actual game feed, as in like what the broadcast is seeing, so that you know to commentate what the fans are seeing. But you have a second monitor, usually on a PC, where you can choose in Go TV other POVs, so you can go and look at stuff. So what I would like is if you could sort of, like we're saying, you could almost like half properly analyze something after the fact in real time, because you know the YouTube feature is you can just skip to where it's live. So if your partner was watching the live stream and he told you, yeah, nothing's happened yet, you could just keep going more in depth on that Baron fight and pick it apart and go into it. And then if they say, oh, quickly go now live, you could click the live button and be in the team fight still and not miss anything. So to me, some kind of innovation like that's needed. I don't know that it's needed like for normal plebs, like I said, I don't think they care, but for people like me and you, even if I don't always understand it, I enjoy people that are really passionate and knowledgeable explaining the game to me. Yeah. It is quite cool, isn't it? You do feel like
it is very good.
As long as you're getting a sense of what they're saying, it does enhance the game, right?
Yeah,
it's essentially how real commentary works in sports, anyway, right?
Yeah, they explain like if you're familiar enough with like the concept of the game, and you like when someone says this is what happens, like analytically, like they did this wave to push this wave to do that. Like, you know enough to follow that, but like it's very hard to come up with that in yourself.
Yes.
So, like,
great.
Yeah, talking to analytics is very helpful just because you're so familiar with the game. It's just that you're not spending like 20, 40 hours a week, 24 hours like trying to understand it to come up with
exactly.
Yourself, so.
That's the other thing I think is kind of silly, actually, is this notion that to listen to the expert stream, you're supposed to be the expert. It's like, well, then why am I so in? You know what I mean? Like, I'll tell you, I've said this before. In CSGO, I don't listen with the casters. That's not because I hate the casters, by the way. It's because by default, they're casting for plebs. Whereas in CSGO, like, this isn't bragging. I've watched every big game of CSGO and every great player and of any version of Counter-Strike, not CS Source, but Counter-Strike and CSGO, I've watched it all. I've watched 20 plus years. So as a result, I don't really give a fuck what they're going to say. I actually mute it because I want to hear my own thoughts. Like how I look at it, what I'm looking at, the flow of the game. Are the CT setups good? Were the rotations right? Does it seem like the T side's a bit hesitant? Are they calling at the right pace? These are the things I'm thinking of because that is my game. I've lived and breathed that game for years and years and years. I mean, what people don't know, mate, is I might even start doing a little bit of content on my channel with some CSGO demos in. Because I feel like Valve's the least likely to ever actually copyright strike me. Whereas I'm too scared to do it with, I won't do it with League on my channel. We might do it on my company's channel because we've got other people that they'd be in trouble for wrecking, like Monty, and we could do the lawyers and all that shit. But the reason why I might do it in CS is because I do think I have every now and then I have a really good insight that someone else doesn't comment on. Like, for example, I was the first one to notice that shit about the CT side economy in CSGO in the modern day, where it's not about winning the round, it's about keeping 3 guns alive. Because otherwise, if you didn't have money, you're going to have a bad buy even though you won the round because you're going to be on like 2K money or whatever. So stuff like that, I do feel like I could illustrate and educate a lot better if I used in-game footage instead of just saying it abstractly like I just did to you there. If I could just show you on the screen, like, see, if you'd have had a gun here, the buy would be slightly better and they'd be in a better situation. Whereas luckily, terrorists can always buy the AK, you know, they can fight a war of attrition. And what people don't know is way back in the day, I actually used to do that sometimes in 1.6. I made videos like that where after a big match, I would take the decisive map and I would pick, like, say, 3 rounds that I thought turned the game to the winner. And I would show you those 3 rounds and I would pause it and I would rewind it and I would show you, like, look, this flank here gets off a bit earlier than normal and they don't notice it. So he's actually going to come way earlier than the guy at the back expects. So actually even used to be my shit. People just don't know because I know plebs just want entertainment. I don't even try to do that on the desk, mate. I just try to be funny, entertaining, give storylines and narratives, set stuff up so that the others can make their points. But I'm not even pretending to be like the super nerd when I'm on the broadcast. But I can do it. They just don't know. They just don't know, mate.
Yeah. I think I had like a
go on if you have another questions. Yeah, go on. Let's do it.
So I have, I don't know, there's some questions that we want to talk, if you want to talk about like elephant, your company and stuff, I have
if
some there. But
firstly,
it's probably not the best person to ask because you're not like a league champion expert, but like, so LS has all these crazy drafts and you want your neutral draft, like you want your swappable picks, whatever. Picks that can go multiple roles first. so you can have a lot more variety.
Yeah, the flex picks. Yeah,
the flex picks. Yeah. So when you have a flex pick, and like there are certain champions that LS says you can flex, but like players just don't play them. They don't want to play them. Like if you flex Draven top, it's super good into certain matchups. But do you ever think like that's ever possible in a pro team status or type of stuff like if you pick like Kled mid, or you're picking like Draven top, or you're picking Ivern support, or you're picking like Ivern Rengar duo.
Here's
like,
the problem.
These things are just like cheese, but like you just can't do them because it's just not viable.
The problem here is this. The reason you're usually going to play, like notice you didn't pick like the most famous meta champions. They tend to be like slightly out of the meta champions that people are specialists on. The reason you're picking a Draven is because you got Hans Sama. Like, you're not doing it because the top laner likes Draven. So the real issue is, yeah, it'd be better for Hans Sama and the coach if the top laner played Draven, but odds are he doesn't, and he doesn't like it, and it's just not his shit. And so I doubt he's going to practice it loads, especially bear in mind, like in this analogy, most times if you don't choose to do the flex, you want it to go to like Hans Sama. You're actually almost threatening that in the draft, right? So then if they try to go counter against Draven, then it goes top, right? So the real problem is, I actually think that G2 2019 team broke everyone's brains. I don't think what they realized was, Wunder is some Soaz type genius that can just want first time stuff or plays it like 3 times in solo queue and it's enough. And he was always willing to do it. Remember, he looked silly on some of those picks. He's absolutely had some games where he looked like an idiot on an Eco or a Pike or fucking some of this shit that he picked top lane. So I also think you have to have a really strong mentality to be the guy that gets the flex, essentially. Because when I've heard some of the stories back in the day, like it's one of the things I've heard about some of the Reaper drafts where he would do like some 200 IQ draft and he would just ask someone like, can you play this though? And they'd be like, yeah, I guess. So then he'd just give it to them and keep trying to do like some god tier, like, you know, he's won every lane matchup, etc. And the problem with that is it's like, yeah, but when that guy said like, yeah, I guess, that actually means like not really, if you know what I mean, if you translate it. Yeah. Whereas he's just saying it like, yeah, I can. And remember, he is Korean. So you might just think like, oh, wow, he's competent on it. It's like, doesn't mean he's going to enjoy it or be confident on it. So to me, like, I mean, the Draven one's a great example. Draven's such a fucking fragile champion that's walking a tightrope so much of the early game. If your top laner doesn't feel it at all or fucks up the wave or gets ganked early and gangbanged by the mid, he's going to have the worst fucking game of his life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's going to be really bad, isn't it?
Yeah. Like the LS proposal is like, if your comp like out comps other comp, you don't need to play the champs as proficiently.
LS's problem.
How well that actually goes.
It's not that he actually thinks everyone's robots. It's that he just wishes they were. That's the distinction people miss. He just wishes they were. And obviously in his teams, he would coach you to do that, but others won't do that. Yeah. Spoiler, I mean, it was said in the Sven interview I did with him. The real problem as well LS had was this. He had buy-in, so people like Fudge were playing those weird champions. People were playing these. But but as like Sven said, if you actually were a player, because remember, they're not going to say this to LS, he's their boss. Apparently, people like Summit and Berserker, because they're Korean, if you know the Korean weights, just find the strongest thing and refine it and iterate on it. You don't like do weird shit. Why would you do that? Just be the best. That's really their fucking weird logic. So apparently they privately, like they were doing it because they were asked to, but their whole shit was sort of like, if I'm Berserker, it's like, why can't I just play Zeri? And if I'm Summit, it's like, just give me Renekton. Like, I don't give a fuck about like I'd just rather play my role. Like, they didn't really understand, like, that's why even though everyone said it's a perfect team for LS, it's like, no, some of the Westerners were really good players for LS. Right. But I actually got the vibe that like the Koreans didn't vibe with his approach at all. It's why in some ways, I mean, I've said this point before, it might sound complicated. I'm pissed off that T1 offered him the fucking job and got Faker to sign off on him being head coach of T1 and then did decline it. And I think, quite frankly, because of things like the fact he's gay and that is culturally not accepted in Korea. And I think there were people in T1 who were Korean who worked against him and maybe stimulated certain elements of the fan base to do the fucked up shit that they did or encouraged it or allowed it. Now, the reason why I hated that is because they lied to him. They sort of told him, hey, here's your dream job at your dream organisation from fucking StarCraft that Boxer was in, and you get to coach Faker. And remember, if you're LS, you don't want to coach, but it's like, fuck, I could win worlds if I do this right. It's your dream. And then you took it away from him. That's why I was pissed at that. I mean, I myself even said, and I told LS this, I wouldn't actually hire him as the fucking coach of T1. I think that would go really badly, mate. I don't think he'll be good. I also don't think he's got the temperament to be a coach. Notice how even when he co-streams, does he ever get through a whole split without having times where he's just mega ill and he has to take days off or have surgery? He's had a million surgeries, mate. It's just constantly there's something off with him. So if you're the coach, you're the guy who always has to turn up. You always have to be reliable. You can never be the one who's the one lying sick in bed, as it were. So I just don't think he's cut out to be it. Like, being a coach is a really strenuous job, mate. It never stops. He's better as an entertainer.
Yeah. In general. Yeah, I don't know. If it's just League is just, I guess people just, you're specialized into one thing, and like the specializing into variety is just not very effective. So,
no, there's not that many people who do that. Like even when people say like, you know, Yamato Cannon's like a player's coach, yeah, he's good at doing speeches and all that, but he still has some good X's and O's. It's just that, you know, certain areas you're stronger in, certain areas you're not as strong in. So it's why I always thought the way people evaluate coaches is so whack. Like, I don't believe this notion that because of XL that Young Buck's a bad coach. Mate, he had totally different rosters and he was getting them to like fucking championships, deep international runs. Like, this guy definitely knows what he's doing. So it's like you say, to me, I mean, it's actually, I don't know if you know much about European soccer, but in European soccer, having a team not perform who's supposed to be good doesn't mean you're a bad manager. It's what we call coach their manager. It just means you probably had the wrong set of players, or you had the wrong type of players who can't be coached by you specifically. So I think it's like that with LEC coaches. I think if you put the Grabses of the world, Young Buck, Yamato, if you put them on the right teams, they'll be compete for the title again. You put them on the wrong teams and they can come ninth. They really can.
All right. So I just had a quick question about like the LFN Discord subscriber thing. So like, how does that work? And like, is that a good subscription service? Like, I have Discord. I don't really use it a whole lot. It's like a discussion forum. I was never into Reddit. So
listen, it's better than Reddit in the sense that like you're having a live conversation. There's no like upvote, downvote, stupid shit and mods coming in and wrecking you. The main reason to subscribe is just if you want to ask questions for stuff like Summoning Insight and Four Horsemen, because we are essentially subscribing allows you access to those channels to submit the questions. So instead of like the old, like by the numbers had a Patreon and we had the fucking grog coin for Summoning Insight, it's essentially the new way to do that. So here's the thing. My Discord's better for actual convos. So I would just say, if you only want to do it to talk, I don't know if it's worth it. I would just say if you want to ask the questions, because you can ask interesting questions of me and Monty and Richard and stuff, I would say that's the main benefit of doing it. And it just gives us a better rev share.
Yeah. And how deep do those questions like go? Like, do you get a lot of them? Like,
just tune into like an episode of Summoning Insight. You'll see. I think there's quite a lot, and they can go as deep as they want in theory. I mean, we're all people like me, Richard and Monty are very good at answering questions. Just try listening to one of those viewer questions at the end. You'll see what I mean.
Yeah. All right.
You can ask potentially almost anything as long as it's not like politically incorrect or something.
Right. All right. I'll probably throw in a question sometimes too, then see how that works.
That's a good idea, mate. I mean, obviously, you can ask Monty if you want to know something as well.
Right, exactly.
As Mary J. Blige said in her track, All I Need, you're all I need to get by, which is the case for me and my Patreon community who support this channel and these videos. Some of them include Theogony, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Ahmed Hadjou, Joseph Adcock, Tosh, Bot Pounder 420, Tooorin, Animosity, Tobias Bernasconi, Jensen Goh, Yurka, and a special thanks always to the main man, Jerky's Minion. Would you like to ask a question in my regular video AMA? Do you want teasers? Find out who upcoming guests are. Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content, or you want to take part in one of those longer esports discussions with me where we go all over the place. Well, if any of those grab your fancy, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Risk Illuminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.